Vincent with Top Producer Radio. I'm talking to Alan Motu with QT Weather at the Chicago Board of Trade in downtown Chicago. And Alan, you've been watching some wet weather here lately. What's the outlook here for farmers over the next week or two?
Well, you're not kidding that it's been wet, particularly across the area from eastern Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, southern Kentucky, even all the way into the Mid-Atlantic region, where I'm looking at a chart right now. It shows the percentage of normal for precipitation over the last 7 days, and areas are talking 200, 300, 400% of normal, almost in a wide swath across that region. And again, over the last days period, we've had precipitation fall heavily across eastern Kansas, eastern Oklahoma, and it's going to continue moving across the same area that has seen this heaviest rain. So that area has really been in the action lately and will continue, both in the near term with the today's rains, and the way it looks now over the next few days, still that area will see training of heavy precipitation. Now, the calculated soil moisture rankings actually show that area to be a little more in the normal category than farther north across the Corn Belt. So we've been focusing particularly farther north in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, states that are behind in corn planting, and that just seemed they can't get a break there, having enough dry days and dry the soils for getting into the fields there. So that's where a lot of the concerns have been recently, as well as across the South. Now, for the Western Corn Belt, though, I think the last time we talked, we were thinking they would fare a little better, and they have. Planting progress is actually ahead of schedule in those regions, Minnesota, Iowa, eastern Nebraska, and even South Dakota. Ironically, we've been talking about how wet the northern plains have been too, but South Dakota is ahead in corn planting from the 5-year averages. So we have a lot of area to cover, a lot to talk about, but overall, if we make comparisons to last year, which a lot have been doing, a lot of farmers and speculators, and the averages actually are showing a lot better than last year. That is, over 52% of the production for corn is showing better than last year, and that is Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, South Dakota, and even Wisconsin ahead of pace from last year. And at this time last year, we actually had 86% of the production of corn behind schedule, behind the 5-year averages. So we're doing much better than last year, but we still have our concerns for those areas you mentioned, all the way across Arkansas, Tennessee, southern Kentucky, and also Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and North Dakota. A lot of territory, but as I say, the percentages show that we still are ahead of last year planting pace for these regions.
Well, when we talked about 10 days ago, Alan, you had mentioned that this was a different weather pattern that we had this year, which didn't concern you as much as what we had last year. What does make this different? And I guess looking for a little bit of the silver lining on the many clouds that are out there.
Well, I think overall we can say the weather that we got farther north, up across Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, the Dakotas, Nebraska, last year was wetter and colder for a good part of the spring. Then we got hit after we got a little bit of warm-up. The struggling of the warmer weather trying to come back gave us 10, 12, 14-inch rains the first week of June across Iowa, Wisconsin, portions of Minnesota, and a second area that late also across Illinois and Indiana. So as I mentioned, we had 86% of the corn production behind schedule going into the middle of May last year, while this year we have many drier regions, particularly the same areas that were wet last year are relatively dry and near ideal planting conditions. That's Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, as I say, ahead of schedule. And we do have our concerns, of course, up in North Dakota still. That area probably similar to last year. But I've seen reports that some are glad that we have the moisture because we didn't really have it up there last year for North Dakota. So I think it's a totally different pattern, totally different turn of events from last year. You can't say that for probably Arkansas into Tennessee and Kentucky that started out last year quite wet but ended up getting the crop in and having good progress during the middle part of the summer. So I think overall, though, those states that were very wet last year now are progressing quite nicely, so that is the big difference. Now, weather-wise, the pattern has been that these systems aren't giving the 10-inch rains, 12-inch rains across the north. In fact, we have the problem of having maybe too numerous rain days but not getting a lot out of it. And we've established the wet soils, the wettest being right now across northern Illinois, Michigan, and northwest Indiana in the 99 percentile ranking. It's the wettest start for this region for the start of the year from January to April that's ever been experienced. So we've started out extremely wet in that area. I think it's hit the news because it's right in the ballpark of the Board of Trade here, and we are having problems, of course, with central Illinois and northern Illinois for planting progress. But the way it looks now is these systems, it doesn't take much to keep the farmers out of the fields, so even a tenth, quarter, half inch of rain is a problem. So that's different in that the precipitation amounts are lighter but more frequent, I'd say, for the areas that are already established as being wet. So that's a difference from last year where we just had the flooding. Remember that we had the worst flooding in 500 years in spots of Iowa last year.
Mm-hmm. So if you're looking to give some advice to farmers right now, what kind of things do they need to be looking for as far as weather patterns on when this might break, and what are you watching to give you your idea of what's going to happen?
I think temperature is extremely important. We need to warm up, and we need to get some gusty winds, and we just haven't had that recently. We've had we've had many systems come across, and we still have that pattern showing. So for farmers, what they need to know, I suppose, is even though we would have percentages below normal on precipitation, I think it's more important whether we have a window that goes 5, 6, 7 days of dry conditions, and that is very difficult to get, and it doesn't appear that's going to happen. I think the last time I talked to you, I gave the impression that we were going to be in a warm and dry period. We'll have many warm, sunny days. Well, even a sunny day or two is not going to help at the point we are now, and I think farmers have to realize that we just aren't going to have for the near term, probably for the next 2-3 weeks, 5, 10 days of drying in these areas that are the wettest. So just light precipitation, which can be at this time of year in a weather pattern, can be touched off what we call nocturnal activity. Just the movement of warm air around can cause the conditions to become wet very quickly. So it's not even an organized system that it takes. Pop-up showers, that sort of thing, are going to be the nuisance, I think, coming forward here. So I think farmers have to adjust and do what they have to do.
All right, Alan. That's Alan Motu with QT Weather in Chicago, and I appreciate your time, Alan.
You're welcome. Thank you.